and a warm welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Olaride. Well, let's begin this week with stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend.
On Sunday, South African authorities began investigating the deaths of at least 21 young people found inside a popular tavern in the coastal town of East London. State broadcaster SABC reported the deaths resulted from a possible stampede, but was scant on the details as the exact cause of death remained unknown. The tavern and surrounding area was cordoned off by the police after authorities were alerted by members of the public to the incident at Scenery Park, about 3 kilometers from the city center. Police officials say those found dead were young adults aged between 18 and 20 years. Autopsies will be carried out as part of the investigation to determine the cause of death. Still on Sunday, Patrice Lumumba's coffin arrived in Haut-Katanga in southeast of Democratic Republic of Congo, where a wake held at the site of the independence hero's murder. A single tooth is all that remains of the young scholar and nationalist politician whose life and career were cut short in a dark struggle for leadership and control of resources in the Central African country. After resting in his native village, the coffin of the former Belgian Congo's first post-independence prime minister pursued its memorial pilgrimage further. It was in this town that Lumumba was executed in January 1961, 4 months after the end of his brief term in office. A symbolic burial in Kinshasa is planned for 30th of June, which is Independence Day. On Saturday, Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, concluded his trip to Egypt with a meeting with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. It is the first trip to the country since Cairo and Doha agreed last year to end a long-running regional feud. The visit included bilateral talks as well as discussions around regional and global issues. Al-Thani last visited Egypt in 2015, but met President Sisi for the first time since the dispute at a summit in Iraq last year. His visit comes days after a visit by Saudi Arabia de facto ruler Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, where both countries announced deals worth $7.7 billion.
Two more stories from today. Forensic experts in South Africa are trying to determine the cause of deaths of 22 young people in a nightclub in the city of East London. Police have ruled out a crush and say the partygoers may have ingested a toxic substance. Most of the dead were teenagers, with some reported to have been celebrating the end of their exams. Local officials say they fear it was a case of underage drinking gone wrong. Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa has expressed his condolences and says he is concerned that young people had gathered at a venue that should be off limits to under 18s. Well, in the meantime, South African authorities have revoked a nightclub's permit to sell alcoholic beverages following this tragic incident. The cause of death still remain unknown. Yellow police tape have been used to cordon off the tavern where the teenagers died after a party on Saturday night. South Africa's Liquor Board has said the nightclub owner will face criminal charges under the underage patrons after the underage patrons, died at the premises. By law in South Africa, nobody under the age of 18 is allowed in nightclubs. Authorities say, well, there were no visible injuries on their bodies, and they suspect that the deaths could be linked to poisoning. Well, let's get more on this story. Joining us now is our South Africa correspondent, Brian Pugeni. Hello, Brian. Let's begin with what the latest is at this time.
Thank you for having me, Layo. Well, at the moment, the latest is police still investigation. That's the word what we're hearing at the moment. The bodies have been taken in for autopsy reports. So that will take a couple of days for the autopsy reports to come out. But at the moment, the reports that we're getting is that there was a stampede. Apparently, tear gas was thrown into the venue. Some of the patrons wanted to go out, whilst there was a number of others who wanted to go into the venue. So that's one of the reports that we had. But what we're also hearing is that none of the bodies had any injuries. So the stampede story is put into question. So it could be a case of alcohol poisoning, or whatever drugs were being served in the venue to these teenagers. We hear that there was one as young as 13 years to up to 17, 18-year-old teenagers which were in the venue. So authorities are investigating. The public is not happy. The blame game has started between parents, the tavern owner, government. So at the moment, we're just all waiting eagerly to hear what the autopsy report is going to say, to determine what really happened to these young children who lost their lives over the weekend.
Well, we know that President Ramaphosa has expressed his condolences, but how are other people, reacting to this, especially residents of East London?
Well, there's been an uproar everywhere. We all woke up to this news. Initially, we saw it on Twitter. We thought it was a hoax. But when the reports finally came out, everyone is really shocked to say, what are these teenagers doing in such a place at that time? Where the parents, the tavern owner, what is he saying when he has young patrons? So residents of the area that itself are really shocked, like the whole country is. We saw the police minister, Begicele, visiting the area yesterday, also breaking down, trying to address the people there. We saw him crying in tears. I think he was also touched by the situation, because it's really tragic to lose young lives like this in such a way. So everyone is really shocked, and we're all just concerned with what's going on in the country itself. We saw the liquor license people saying that they're going to press charges. We're seeing different groups and organizations saying that underage drinking itself is a problem in this country. So everyone is just really, really shocked and really sad.
It's quite sad, and like we've established, the cause of death still remains unknown. But like you've also mentioned, authorities are saying the owner of this nightclub will face criminal charges. What are the consequences for this person eventually?
Well, if he is charged, I think there will be a lot of charges against him. There is negligence, there is culpable homicide, which could be an issue as well. So we are just waiting. There were reports, but we're not 100% sure that he was taken in for questioning as well, him and his wife. But he says he was not even at the venue during the time when this incident happened. But it's going to be really bad for him if he's found guilty for negligence, culpable homicide, because lives were lost at the end of the day, and he's the one responsible for the establishment. Whether he was there or not, things happened at his establishment. So he could really face serious consequences if he's found in any wrongdoing.
All right then, Brian Pugeni, our South Africa correspondent. Thank you. The African Union has called for an immediate investigation into the death of at least 23 migrants who died on Friday when a huge crowd tried to cross into Spain's North African enclave of Melilla. AU Commission Chairperson Musa Faki Mahamat said he was shocked and concerned about the treatment that African migrants received when they attempted to cross international borders. The authorities in Morocco said some of those who died had fallen from the top of a border fence that separates Morocco and Melilla. More than 130 people managed to jump over the fence that Friday. Melilla and Ceuta, Spain's other North African enclave, have the European Union's only land borders on the African continent. Friday's mass crossing attempt was the first since Spain and Morocco ended a year-long diplomatic dispute in March. Well, here here in Nigeria, the Chief Justice of the country, Justice Tanko Muhammad, has resigned. Special Assistant on Media to Justice Muhammad, Mr. Ahuraka Issa, confirmed the resignation of his principal. He also says the next most senior justice of the Supreme Court, Justice Olukayode Ariwola, will be inaugurated at the villa today. Well, reports say he resigned late yesterday due to ill health. Only last week, 14 justices of the Supreme Court had written him a letter to lament the decrepit state of affairs in the court. Meanwhile, Justice Tanko Muhammad, who chairs the Board of Governors of the Nigerian Judicial Institute, did not show up at the opening of a training for judges on alternative dispute resolution this morning, an event organized by the Institute. Well, he is known to have missed an NJI event since assuming the chairmanship position of the governing board. Well, at this time, Justice Olukayode Ariwola has been sworn in as the Chief Justice of Nigeria, as the acting Chief Justice of Nigeria. We'll bring you more details on that story later on in our other bulletins. But we'll move on to Benin Republic, where 2 police officers have been killed and another wounded in a rebel attack on a police station in the northwestern region. Local media and police sources say this appears to be a spillover effect of unrest in neighboring Burkina Faso and Niger. Fighters descended on the Dasari police station at about 2 a.m. local time on Sunday and opened fire, killing 2 police officers before they were pushed back. Local media reports that an officer was injured in the attack, and the fighters also set ablaze impounded motorcycles at the station. In the meantime, no group has so far claimed responsibility for the attack. The Africa Development Bank, ADB, has pledged some $3 billion to be invested over the next 10 years to end vaccine dependency across the continent. The plan includes a new pharmaceutical center for research, development, and manufacturing based in Rwanda's capital, Kigali. Well, this has been widely lauded as key towards ending Africa's dependence on outside donations, as recently witnessed during the COVID-19 pandemic. ADB says it will also help patent and license African-made medicines and support governments to navigate the intellectual property rights to global vaccines and medicines. It follows a recent World Trade Organization announcement of a partial waiver on coronavirus vaccine patents, allowing select developing countries to produce the jabs. ADB also says Africa currently imports more than 70% of all its medicines, spending about $14 billion every year. Well, Sudan's military is accusing the Ethiopian army of executing 7 of its soldiers and a civilian who were captives. A statement published on the Sudanese state media calls the alleged killings a treacherous act and said there would be a response. However, there's been no comment so far from the Ethiopian side. A long-running border dispute has flared up over the last 2 years, with occasional clashes in the Al-Fashaga area. Sudan has also been angered by Ethiopia's construction of a giant dam on the River Nile. Well, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has launched the Action Agenda on Internal Displacement, saying that the world is facing a crisis with record high numbers of people around the world displaced within their countries. During the launch, Mr. Guterres highlighted the situation in Ukraine, noting that in just 3 months, the war drove 13 million people out of their homes and communities.
Numbers of these forcibly displaced persons on the planet today exceeds 100 million people. The High Commissioner for Refugees recently described this number as the seemingly unimaginable. Amongst these 100 million, the largest category of persons are internally displaced persons, people who've been forced to flee their homes but have not crossed an international border and find themselves sheltering still in their own country. In 2021, a staggering 59 million people were living in this category of internal displacement. The number has more than doubled in the past decade. The Action Agenda's overriding message is simple. More of the same is not good enough. In line with the findings of the high-level panel, the Action Agenda makes it clear that fundamental changes are needed in the way in which we work if we're to make real progress in resolving, in preventing, and better addressing internal displacement. The Action Agenda sets out 31 concrete commitments by the UN system for how we will deliver this change. The commitments range from opening a new financing mechanism to developing individual agency plans on internal displacement, to working with governments on root causes, scaling up investments in early warning, and many other actions.
In Muammar Gaddafi's hometown, people are losing hope for Libya's future. The people living in the ruins of Sirte have been waiting for years for help to remove the wreckage from the city or rebuild what can be rebuilt, with no major responses from the government or NGOs.
Residents of Sirte's 600-block district have waited years for help, removing rubble and rebuilding homes damaged by warfare. But despite the new Libyan government making the city its headquarters, they have little hope of change. They live in apartments where bullet holes let in the winter cold and summer heat in shell-poked buildings that look structurally unsound.
Since Sirte was destroyed in 2015, nobody has looked at it. We're living in rented houses. We asked the government and all the organizations, but nobody answered. Nobody found any solutions, just promises.
Omar struggles. In a city that has alternately been run by nearly every powerful faction in Libya, demonstrates how the oil-rich country's divided rulers have been less focused on governing than on fighting or exploiting state resources. This month, as the latest political stalemate festered, one of Libya's two rival governments set up its headquarters in Sirte, a central coastal city near where the front lines solidified after the last major conflict paused in 2020. The establishment there of Fathi Bashaga's parliament-appointed government, which is mainly backed by eastern factions, brings a new role to a city that has suffered some of the darkest twists of Libya's turbulent recent history. Sirte's most prominent son, former dictator Muammar Gaddafi, was killed there after fleeing Tripoli during a 2011 NATO-backed uprising that ousted his regime and triggered years of violence.
We're talking about a city that is severely damaged. All military troops have been used up here. Heavy weapons. The infrastructure needs to be rebuilt. The city needs the rubble to be removed. The international community, the Halo Trust, the DCA, and other international organizations need to cooperate with us.
The 600 block where Omar lives was originally built as housing for guests at the 1999 African Union Summit, which drew leaders from across the continent and marked a short-lived high point for the city. It was damaged first in 2011 and then in the 2016 fighting to evict Islamic State when it came under the Tripoli government. Then, in early 2020, the Eastern Libyan National Army under Khalifa Haftar seized Sirte as part of a wider offensive whose collapse months later brought a 2-year peace process that is now under intense strain.
In a bid to turn to clean energy, a hotel in Egypt's resort town of Sharm el-Sheikh is the first to operate a solar-powered plant, which they believe helps protect the environment.
A Red Sea hotel in Egypt's resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh initiated a solar-powered electricity generating panel in a bid to turn to clean energy as the city prepares to host the upcoming COP27 summit in November. Royal Albatross Modena Resort started to partially depend on a 1-megawatt solar power plant on the rooftop, prompting significant improvement in cutting carbon emissions and rationalizing consumption.
The main reason behind building this solar energy plant is to protect the environment, because this 1 megawatt solar power plants that have been established saves 140 tons of CO2. Secondly, from an economic point of view, it saves around 30% of the hotel's consumption of electricity for every 1 megawatt.
The Cairo-based project developer, Solar Sol Energy Company, aims to maximize on the high sun isolation Egypt requires.
For Corona, COVID-19,
it is very beneficial environmentally and economically. It will also add to the value of the hotel because of the low carbon footprint and high oxygen levels. Each 1 megawatt solar power plant saves around 1,300 tons of CO2 emissions per year. This creates a healthy community.
The low running cost of clean energy comes at a time when Egypt is struggling with lower tourism revenues amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine last February, which Moscow calls a special military operation. Ukrainian and Russian tourists had made up 31% of visitor numbers to Egypt before the war. Egypt takes over presidency of the UN climate talks from Britain. The summit takes place from November 7 to 18th in Sharm el-Sheikh. On May 19th, Egypt announced its National Climate Strategy 2050, which included plans to rely on renewable energy and to expand solar and wind projects.
Back here in Nigeria, the Ondo State Command of the National Drug Enforcement Agency is holding a public rally on the streets of Akure, the Ondo State capital, to educate the public on the dangers of drug abuse as part of this year's celebration of the United Nations International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Drug Trafficking. The commander of NDLEA in Ondo State, Mumuni Raji, says drug abuse is a major reason for the high rate of crime in the society.
We are telling everybody, stay away from drugs. As we have said, drug is not a respecter of anybody. It affects all segments of the society. It is not just a matter of my children are not doing drugs, so I'm happy. It does not concern me. This drug concerns everybody. If your children are not doing drugs, those who are doing drugs can harm your children. The level of insecurity in any society is dependent on the level of drug abuse. So there's a positive correlation between drug abuse and crime. In other words, the higher the drug abuse in a particular society, the higher the level of crime in that society. And conversely, we have made a lot of arrests, but we don't like to bandy the number of arrests we have made because it does not tell a good story. For instance, between June 2021 and May 2022, we have arrested over 30,000 kilograms of India hemp. Of drugs, consisting of various types of drugs. We have also arrested about 294 suspects, among which 65 of them have been sentenced to various jail terms by the Federal High Court Akure.
And finally on the program, Nigerian singer Temilade Okpeniyi, popularly known as Tems, has made history as the first Nigerian and African female to win the Best International Act Award at the BET. She was crowned this year's Best International Act at the ceremony in Los Angeles on Saturday. While accepting her prize, she said she was honored to have been recognized, saying the BET that this is her first award show and that she's winning something. The 27-year-old is best known to fans outside of Nigeria for a huge hit with Wizkid in 2020 called Essence. A later remix of that song featuring Canadian star Justin Bieber was also named Best Collaboration at the BET Awards on Sunday. Well, Tems' win comes 2 weeks after she was diagnosed with reflux laryngitis. Many congratulations to her, and that's how we end the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.